Good morning. And I would like to, if you're visiting, to welcome you this morning, get rid of that, to the Northwest region of Denver Church of Christ. It's great to be together. Now, this has been an action-packed weekend, I got to tell you. Man, there's a lot going on. Of course, Friday night, the men of the church met for our very first Men of God night down on campus at the at Metro State, and we just had this amazing time. We talked about men of faith, and I was so inspired. Some of the things that were shared that night. Carlos Clark, I went to a class with him, and man, Jeffrey, and he just did a great job. And then Saturday morning, I went to our Series 33 the series. I'll get there sometime. And where, the men of the church, we're going on this journey together to discover authentic manhood according to the life of Jesus. And it was an amazing time. We have 25 young men, all under the age of 30, except for me and a few others. And we are going on this incredible journey together about what is the definition of true, authentic manhood. And we just had a great time together discovering that. The men of all the entire church are doing that, and it really has been an incredible time. But then, yesterday, I went to a shower for my daughter, a wedding shower. What an amazing moment. And I was speechless. Wade was the MC, so we had a world-class MC there. But to be honest with you, I was pretty speechless. Seeing my daughter going through this and just so amazed by the love of the church and the fellowship. And, we had 60 or 70 people come, and they all gave gifts. Most of them gave gifts. And advice. Some of just the greatest advice, but mostly just the love and the kindness and the devotion of the Christians in this beautiful faith community that we share. And for all of those who were there yesterday, and for all of you, the goodwill that you bring, and just want to say thank you. What an amazing thing. As a father, as you're seeing your daughter launching into this new part of her life, it's so inspiring knowing that she's surrounded by people that love her, and that both she and her soon-to-be husband have dated in a righteous way. They've never been impure with each other. They both believe the Bible. They both love each other. They love the Lord, and they're surrounded by people that love them. As a father, you're like, wow, this is such a gift. I'm so grateful to see them take this journey, and that was so amazing. And then, of course, today is an incredible highlight because my mother is with me this morning, right here. My mother, Frances, is here. She's right here in the third row. So excited to be with them. We're busy in our church, and next weekend's an exciting weekend as well because we're having our retreats next weekend. Both the teen, the campus, and the singles are having a retreat, and I want to encourage you to go. The theme of the retreat is all in, and I remember as a young Christian, I was about 2 weeks old, and I was struggling spiritually, and I was having all kinds of doubts and really wondering what this all meant, and I went to a retreat, and it so changed my life. I can still remember arriving at the retreat, and Willie Flores was preaching that night, and he was preaching on the cross, and that really changed my life. These retreats will really change your life. I really encourage you to be a part of it. Today, I want to start off with a story. I don't know if anybody knows who this woman is. Does anybody know who that woman is? Any takers out there? Her name is Ramona Pearson. And that was your guess, right? His guess. Her name is Ramona Pearson. And Ramona Pearson really is an amazing person. She is currently the Chief Executive Officer of a company called Synaptic MASH. And they are a company that devises specialized learning plans for kids with disabilities. And she's on the forefront of helping kids learn. And they've had these wonderful results where they use the internet and they put up together these specialized learning plans, and they figure out what a child's learning challenge is, and they put them all together, and they've seen some really amazing results. And so she currently is kind of a leader in this field. But that's not really the story that I want to tell you. The story I want to tell you about Ramona is the process by which she got to that point. Because that is really a genuinely an amazing story. When Ramona was 22 years old, she got her dog and she went out jogging. And little did she know that at the very same time, A man was driving home drunk, and as she ran across the road with her dog, this person hit her with his car. Killed her dog, knocked her out in front of the car, and then hit her a second time, hit her in the neck with his bumper, her leg got caught in the wheel well, and he literally spun her leg all the way through the wheel well. Ramona would have died on the spot, except for somebody who arrived on the scene and took a big pin and did a field surgery on the spot. Inserted a big pin in her neck and a big pin, the cavity of big pin, and went into her lung and kept her alive. They took Ramona to the hospital. When they got her to the hospital, they induced a chemically induced coma and they packed her in ice. And she stayed that way for 18 months. 18 months Ramona was in a coma. Her chances of survival were so low that the hospital personnel started calling her a gomer. Anybody know what a gomer is? Have you ever heard that an acronym before? It stands for Get Out of My Emergency Room. And they begin to call people gomers who they think don't have any chance of ever having a normal life again. They don't think there's any way that they could recover, that they have so much damage done, and they have such a long recovery process, that they don't believe that they justify any medical resources. And so in kind of a callous way, they start calling them a gomer. They started calling Ramona a gomer. When she emerged from her coma, she weighed less than 70 pounds. She was crippled. She was blind. And she had so many surgeries. She had had 104 bones broken at the time. And she had so many surgeries on her neck where the bumper struck her that she was no longer able to talk. And they had no idea what to do with Ramona. She was 22. She didn't have any money. She didn't have the resources to get well. She didn't have a family to take care of her. They had no idea. What do we do with Ramona? And so they did an interesting thing. They brought her here to Colorado, and they put her in a senior citizens home. And that's where a genuine miracle took place. Because little did they realize that they had placed her in an environment where there was a group of people who had a collection of wisdom, a set of nurturing skills, a heart and a desire to help Ramona get back on her feet. And that's what they did. First thing they did is they said, well, let's go rummage around in our storage spaces and we'll come up with some furniture for her. And they did that. And it's like, she doesn't have any clothes. Well, we'll give her a makeover. She looks about 80 years old when we're done, but we'll give her a makeover. And they did that. And they're like, well, we're going to have to teach her how to talk again. And so they began working with her to learn how to talk again. She couldn't talk. She was young. She was struggling to know how to talk. And so they began to try to teach her to talk. And to solve that, because she was so self-conscious about it, that the older men there in the senior citizens home started playing Scrabble with her, only it was cuss word Scrabble. Don't advise cussing. But they got her laughing so hard that she just got over her fear of trying to talk, and she learned how to talk again. She learned how to walk again. They took her out into traffic. She was terrified to go back out in traffic. They said, one of the older women said, listen, when they got to the curb, she said, I'm afraid to go across the street. She goes, listen, this is how you do it. You take your cane, you stick it out in the roadway. If it gets knocked out of your hand, don't go. And so they got her to get over her fears. They got together. They said, let's pool our money. We'll send her to a school to learn how to read Braille. So they sent her to school to learn to read Braille. She learned how to read Braille. Then they said, let's put our money together. We'll send her back to school. She went back to school. While she was at school, she began to earn advanced degrees. Then another miracle happened. She went through rehabilitation. She learned how to walk again. And then they discovered that if we do an operation on her eyesight, we can help her to recover her sight in one eye. And she had her sight restored. She became a competitive cyclist. Even won some races as a competitive cyclist. And as she was going through this, she developed a great sensitivity to learning challenges. She was like, I know what it feels like to be learning disabled. I know what it's like to struggle. So she began to volunteer time in the school systems. She developed a kind of an understanding of all of this. She got a PhD and some other things. She developed this special process for helping kids. Now she's like the leading education researcher, one of the leading in the country. Is that not an amazing story? Isn't that extraordinary? From a gomer to a CEO, playing an incredible role in our society. How did that happen? What was the process of that? Here's what it is. Ramona Pearson was the beneficiary of a loving community. They were, because we're now in our sermon series up to the older son, and the role the older son was meant to play, I wanted to start with that story because that is an illustration of the older brother, the older sister, kind of taking charge with Ramona. This amazing set of people who have all this understanding, wisdom, and skills, put their arm around Ramona, and she makes this miraculous recovery. You know, today, God has placed each of us, or His desire is to place each of us in this incredible, loving community. He wants miracles done through the community. Look around. You're in a faith community. Well, yesterday when I was with my daughter at the shower, I was just struck again. What an amazing, incredible gift God's community, God's family really is. What a gift we have here. And that's what you have today. God intends to do miracles through it. He intends to do miracles of healing. He intends to change our life. He intends to bless us. That's what Jesus is seeking to accomplish when the Pharisees come along. If you'll turn your Bible over to Luke 15. And we are doing a series on Devoted to the Father, the study of the story of the two lost sons. And the title of today is The Older Son. And Jesus comes along, and it says in verse 1, I'll read this again, I've read it in the past, but it says in verse 1, Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, The man welcomes sinners and eats with them. They began to criticize Jesus because he gathered sinners to him. They did not understand that Jesus was forming a community. This incredible faith community. He had gathered his 12 disciples. His intent was to come and seek and to save the lost. He told the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 9, verse 11, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked the disciples, Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this, Jesus said, It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. I have come to seek the sick. I have come to seek the wounded. I have come to seek the hurting. I've come to seek the lost. I've come to seek those who are searching for God, who need God. That's why I'm here. I'm seeking for them. I'm gathering people around me to be a part of this incredible faith journey and faith community that can heal the sick and the wounded. And so he calls them together. And then he tells them these stories. And we're up to the part of the story, if you look in Luke 15. Now, last week, we talked about how Jesus had... I always get a bit impatient. We got to the part of the story where Jesus had called home the younger son. And the younger son had pursued the world. You know, the church needs to always be dealing properly with the world, doesn't it? You know, the younger son, he had been at the Father's table. And he had been with the Father, but his heart wasn't with the Father. And he began to desire the world. And he began to think about the world and be drawn to the world. And then he pursued the world. And as Jesus is trying to build this great faith community, there really are two challenges that the church has to go through in order to get to this place. You know, have you ever talked to somebody, they'll go, I bet I've had this conversation 12, 15 times, where you'll go, what do you think about Jesus? I think Jesus is awesome. What do you think about the church? I don't like the church. You ever felt that in your heart? They didn't even wrote a book with that entitled. You know, I love the church, I love Jesus, but I hate the church. There's like a book title out like that. And the reason is because God struggles with the church for it to be what He's looking for. And that's what this parable reveals. It reveals kind of the two big challenges that the church faces in being the community that can heal people, like what I described at the beginning of the lesson. You know, the first challenge is the challenge with the world. See, the younger son began to be drawn to the world. And he began to feel the pull of the world. And inside the church, there is a pull we often feel towards the world. The technical term for that is syncretism. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. Syncretism is where the church and the philosophies of the day begin to blend. And the philosophies kind of our world start to creep into the church. And the church of every generation has got to struggle with syncretism, to not blend in with the world. And the younger son is an illustration of that. He was drawn back to the world. Each one of us are battling not to allow ourselves to blend back into the world or allow the church to do that. Recently the Center for Prevention of Teen Pregnancy did a study of sexuality in America. And they specifically, they categorized people, but they categorized all those people from 18 to 29 who would call themselves evangelical Christians. They discovered that 80% were sexually active. 80% were experiencing sexual immorality in their dating relationships. That's what syncretism is. It's blending the world back into Christianity, being like the world around us. As we this year are calling for the church to be devoted, what we're really doing is we're calling the church to be different, to be devoted in a way that's unlike the world we live in. To be devoted to the Lord, devoted to the Father in a way that's different, devoted to one another in a distinct and unique way. Last week, John spoke about devoted to the mission. Syncretism is to kind of just blend into the community that we're around. See, when we stop sharing our faith, that is kind of a syncretism in motion where we just blend into the community. The church has to decide to deal effectively and righteously with a pull towards the world. How are you doing with it? Are we really a different people today? Is our sense of devotion going to really produce that? And so that was the story of the younger son. But today we're talking about the story of the older son. Because that is the kind of the next part of the journey. Look with me, if you will, in Luke chapter 15, verse 25. It says there, "Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when the son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" The second big challenge that the church faces in being this loving community is the challenge of the church becoming religious and kind of prideful. And that's what the second son is really experiencing. Because really, when you examine him, he has a very negative reaction to the younger son being saved. And this is Jesus' response to the Pharisees. As Jesus is speaking here, that this is the spirit of the Pharisees. And the older son, he's coming back in from the field, and he hears the sound of music and dancing. Now, you would think that he would like that, wouldn't you? Like, hey, that sounds kind of cool. There's music and dancing. And yet it's like, this is a foreign sound to me. I haven't heard this very often. Sometimes church is kind of like that, isn't it? Church is supposed, your service to God is supposed to be fun. There's supposed to be some music and dancing attached to it, isn't it? And yet, the older son, there wasn't a lot of music and dancing going on. This is sort of a foreign idea. And so he's coming back in out of the field, and he asks one of the servants. It's like, listen, what is that? What's going on? And he's revealing how he's disconnected from the Father. He doesn't know what the Father's thinking. He doesn't know what the Father's intent is. And then when he hears, the younger son has come back, he gets angry. That is his response. The older brother becomes angry. Now, there are some reasons for that. One reason is he's morally indignant. It's like this person has done so much harm to our family. He's done so much harm. He's taken 1/3 of our possessions, 1/3 of our revenue-producing capacity, 1/3 of that which gives us security, and he has sold it and spent it on prostitutes. What is he even doing back here? I can't believe it. I'm morally indignant that we would even allow him back on the premises. And he is suffering greatly for it. You know, I started this series off by telling you about the story of the farm I grew up on. And my mother will certainly understand this. Man, my father was serious about not selling any of that land. He understood growing up in the background that he had what that land meant. And for me, as some crazy dumb kid, to have come to him and said, "Hey, Dad, listen, give me 1/3 of this. I'm going to sell it and go party with it." I can only imagine what he would have done. He's a pretty salty old guy. I can imagine some of the language that would have gone on at that point. I know how he would have reacted because he knew the value and the importance of the land. He knew what it meant to you as a family. You know, recently I watched the movie of Mice and Men. The Grapes of Wrath. Got them confused in my head, but The Grapes of Wrath, and it's, you know, the story of the Dust Bowl and people losing their land, and there's this poignant scene where the mother says, "We're not a family anymore. We're just driving around in this crazy truck. You know, we used to have boundaries, we used to have possessions, we used to have a home. We don't have it, and our family's falling apart because of it." She's talking to her son Tom. And it's this poignant moment in the movie, and that's true. We're struggling as a family, so here's the older son saying, "I am indignant that you would allow this person back on the property. He shouldn't even be here. He's harmed us so much." And that is human nature, isn't it? Isn't it our human nature when someone really hurts us to pull back? Have you ever gotten the silent treatment? Maybe in your marriage? I have. And I got to say, I was worthy of it each time it happened. You give the silent treatment. The silent treatment is, you have hurt me, and I'm going to pull back some from you. Have you ever, somebody maybe borrowed some money from you and didn't pay it back, and then you see them coming again, you're like, "Oh man, I don't know how to talk to this person." Have you ever had somebody say something insulting to you, hurt your feelings, be insensitive, and then the thought goes to your mind, "Should I really talk openly with this person? Should I be vulnerable with this person? Should I be real with this person?" I think not. I think we'll have a surfacey conversation. I think I'll end this conversation fairly quickly. Because you know this person's hurt me in the past. Maybe you've gone through something really tough. Maybe you've been divorced. And you know how you feel in your heart towards that person. Or maybe you've been cheated at some point in the past. And you know how you feel. It is human nature to say, "No way. You're coming no further." And that's all the Son is doing. That's all the Pharisees are doing. They're looking at these sinners in Israel and going, "Man, I am morally indignant with these people." And yet, that is just not like the Lord. And that's where the part of the story, if you really meditate, becomes amazing. Because our Christianity, our Christian faith, our Christian community, it is built on the heart of God, on the goodness of God. That He thinks and acts in a way that you and I don't. And you know, when I was meditating this, I was like, I have a bad attitude towards God. I do not appreciate the heart of God. Because what you see is a complete contrast between the older son and the father. The father sees the son coming. And as you remember I said last time, he hoists up his robes in a most embarrassing fashion for the paterfamilias, the father. He hoists up his robes so you can see his bare legs. And he's running down the road with this great sense of enthusiasm. The only way he could do that is because when he was back in the house, when the son is long gone and hasn't come home, and he's ruminating and thinking about how much this has hurt him. How much asking for a third is a statement of, "You're dead to me. I don't want to be here. I don't appreciate being in the family." The pain that had to have caused him as he was thinking about that, as he was thinking about how much this has hurt his family, how much they've lost, how hard this is. In the midst of that, he forgave him. That's what he did. As he was thinking about it, as he's waiting for his son to come home, in his heart of hearts, he said, I forgive you. That's not going to be the first thing that I think about when I think about you. The next time I see you, I'm not going to have that pulled back approach. Nope, I forgive you. I still love you. I love you unconditionally. I love you with all my heart. The next time I see you, I'm going to spring off the porch and run and throw my arms around you and kiss you because I forgive you. And so the older son had no concept of that. He didn't forgive him. We live in a world that does not forgive. We live in a world that's vindictive and holds grudges and gets bitter. And wars start that way, and family disputes go on that way. And hurts and pains and suffering happens because of that. And the Lord sets this amazing example where He forgives. You see, the older son, he did not understand forgiveness. If we're going to build a community that reflects the true nature of God, a healing community, a community like Ramona ran into, where miracles could happen, then we must understand forgiveness. You've got to understand forgiveness as it applies to you. That you're forgiven. You need to apply that to yourself as you relate to God. You need to apply that to others. You need to do a profile and a catalog in your mind where you go, all the people that have ever hurt me. Yep, when I think of this person, and I think about, okay, we're going to sit just the two of us in a little small room together. What's the conversation going to be like? We're going to have to interact personally. What's the conversation like? If it's not, well, it'll be pleasant. I like that person. Then you have a grudge. You have something against that person. The Bible commands you to forgive. It commands forgiveness. It inspires forgiveness. It calls for it. He was morally indignant because he was incapable of forgiving. See, the church is built on forgiveness. It's a fundamental principle. He was also angry because he did not want to share the estate. See, the way it worked was that, and I've said this in the past, 1/3 of the estate went to the younger son, 2/3 of the estate would have gone to the older son. Now, the reason that happened is because the older son is responsible for the survival of the whole family. So it's his responsibility to see to it that their family survives. And so he's given the majority of the resources so he can do that. You know, in our farm, there was one older son. This is my mother's siblings. There was one son, Carl, who was the oldest, and there were 7 daughters. In an old world style of distribution, my grandfather gave the one son half the place and the other 7 girls the other half. That's just the way sort of that old world thinking is. Now, when the younger son came home, the older son in his heart is saying, okay, he gave him the ring. He put the robe back on him. He's a member of the family again. That means he's entitled to what's here on the place. I don't want to do that. I don't want to share. I don't want the sacrifice of that. I don't want to put forward the effort and the suffering and the sacrifice of re-including him in the family. You know, as Christians, we have to ask ourselves, honestly, are we at a point where we're ready and willing to sacrifice to help people be saved? Why did we go through this little exercise today of handing out the pledge sheets? Why did we do that? And did you get kind of bugged in the middle of that? Oh, man, why are we beating on this again? Well, as a leadership, we are asking you to sacrifice. We're asking for it. We're calling on you to sacrifice so that people can be saved. You know, John's lesson last week was a call to sacrifice for the welfare of people who are lost. Are we still, in our heart of hearts, really willing to sacrifice, or are we like the older son that doesn't really want the sacrifice? See, the Pharisees didn't really want that. If we ever get to the point where we no longer want the sacrifice of evangelism, we no longer want the sacrifice of helping the lost, we have become religious but we aren't righteous. We've become a religion, but that's not a relationship with God. You see, the Pharisees were disconnected from the heart of God. The older son was disconnected from the heart of the Father. But then the next thing he said, yet you never gave me even a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. You know, he was angry first, but then the next thing he started feeling, as he was feeling like, this is unjust and unfair. You ever felt that with God? This is unjust. This is unfair. You never gave me. And the reason that I wanted to do this series is because I was going through some things last fall, and I was really struggling spiritually. One of our kids decided that they didn't want to come to church anymore. And that created for me a real crisis of faith. I'm just being honest here. It created for me wow. Now, she's an incredible kid, and she's working through these things, and I just need to be a patient person. But it created for me this sort of crisis of faith. I found myself with God going, man, God, I'm not very happy right now. And I don't understand you. And I found myself kind of getting mad at God. Like, God, why haven't you taken care of some things in my life? And I started to identify here with the older son where he says, you never gave me. You just never took care of this. You never took care of me. What's happening here? And maybe you're the same way. Maybe in your life, there are some things in your life that hasn't always worked out. And I think for different people, it's different challenges. Maybe it's a financial challenge. Maybe it's a health challenge. Maybe it's a relationship challenge. Maybe that right person never's come into your life and you feel like it's unfair. Maybe that right person left you. Maybe somebody died. You can't believe it. Maybe some dream fell apart and you can't believe it. And what happens is, in our heart of hearts, we get this kind of, you never gave me kind of spirit. And what it is, it's a spirit of entitlement. It's a spirit that we believe in our heart of hearts. Faithful service deserves, boom, this. I've served faithfully, therefore. I've prayed, I've walked with you, and therefore I deserve this. And I found myself struggling with that. And that's what the older son is saying. He's saying, I deserve blessings. I deserve a young goat. I deserve you to have thrown a party for me. Look at all, I've slaved for you. I've worked and you never gave me. You never let me celebrate with my friends. You're unfair with me. You don't love me. You don't look out for me. You don't take care of me. You don't watch for me. This isn't right. All that's describing is a sense of entitlement. In America, we have a great sense of internal entitlement. And in Christianity, it's easy to get to a point where we say in our heart of hearts, wow, this isn't fair. God's not fair. God's not righteous. And we don't walk near to God. And that's what the older son is struggling with. The father, his response is, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. He goes back to a statement of relationship. But we have a relationship. You're always with me. And see, that's the way this is supposed to be working. We're close. We have a relationship. You're always with me. And everything I have is yours. In other words, I really have blessed you. I know in my own life, when I just decided, okay, I'm going to get rid of the sense of entitlement, I was blown away what happened in my relationship with God. All of a sudden, it was like scales fell from my eyes. I looked around, and it's like, wow, look at all the things God's done for me. And I just started enumerating them. I started writing them down. I started making these lists, 20 things I love lists. I started with Suzanne. I said, I'm going to write down 20 things about Suzanne that I love. I got to 22 pretty quickly. It was really an easy exercise. Wow. And then I was like, I'm going to write down 20 things I love about being in the ministry. Really easy to do. I'm going to write down 20 things I love about my home and family. I wrote it down. 20 things I love about Colorado. I wrote it down. 20 things that I appreciate that I have in my life that God's blessed me. And pretty soon, I had all these lists of all these things that I felt like God had done for me. And it's like my eyes just opened. This statement, everything I have is yours. I've done all kinds of things for you. Be grateful. Be grateful. That's the lesson I personally learned. How about you? Are you grateful? Do you realize all the things that God has done for you? God has taken such good care of us. He's taking good care of you. He's given you many things. We need to cultivate a sense of gratitude. The idea that you never gave me. No, everything I have is yours. And not only that, but I'm always with you. Right. I'm with you in your life. We have a relationship. And then finally, the final thing the older son said is, but he answered his father, look! All these years I've been slaving for you and have never disobeyed your orders. And you got to understand the way this comes out in the Greek is this is really disrespectful. It's like, now you look here, Dad. Look here. Wait a second. I want you to pay attention to something. Look here. I've never disobeyed you all these years. I've been slaving for you. I've been serving you. I've been faithful. I've never disobeyed your orders. And, of course, the response that Jesus would make to that is, and he said this to the Pharisees in another place, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. See, the Pharisees, the older brother's fundamental problem is the ability to say, I've never disobeyed you. I've done what's right. I don't see my own sin anymore. The Pharisees were unable, because they were doing the major things right, they were unable to see their own hearts and the sins of their own hearts. The difference between the younger son and the older son is that the younger son repented and came home, and the older son never does. His father goes out and pleads with him, come into the banquet. Come into the banquet. And the older son refuses, thus super embarrassing his father. The sad part about this story is that the older son, that's the way the story ends. In the parable of the sheep is found and there's rejoicing. In the parable of the coin is found and there's rejoicing. In the parable of the younger son, eventually the younger son comes home and there's rejoicing. But the story ends with the older son not coming into the banquet. And that's what Jesus is trying to say to the Pharisees, saying, you're not going to come into the banquet, thus you're going to be lost. For those of us who've been in and around Christianity for a long time, we have to be very careful with our hearts. Because we can be lost. We can be like the older son, who gets kind of entitled, who forgets how to repent, who has gotten the major things out of their life, but no longer really has the heart to sacrifice, the heart to continue to love the Father, the heart to love the lost, the heart to be really grateful, who don't really change. As we think back to these last few years, we've called out His divine power. We've called out, be devoted. Do we really repent? Do we remember how to repent? Do we change? Are we cut to the heart like the younger son was? And do we repent? The older son is left out of the feast. And that's the sad part of the story. And it is a response to the Pharisees saying, you're not going to be included in my great banquet. What Jesus ultimately is trying to say, He's trying to say, I'm the true older son. And that's the point of this story. See, Jesus comes like the older son should have been and finds the lost. They're criticizing Him for seeking the lost, but He's saying, listen, you guys don't want to sacrifice anymore. I'll give up everything for these people. You don't want to be devoted to them. I'll spend all my time on them. You won't give up your inheritance. I'll give up heaven. I'll leave heaven for these people. I'll give everything I have. I'm the true older son. Philippians chapter 2, I won't take the time to read it, but it speaks to that. It's like, I'm the true older son. I'll seek the younger brother. I'll seek him. I'll spend my whole inheritance. I'll do everything that he needs because I'm the true older brother. The story that we began with was this incredible community that would heal Ramona Pearson back to life again. Because like true older brothers and sisters, they're able to give and love and sacrifice and take care of this person. And that is what's inside the heart of the true older son, Jesus. He'll lay His life down. He'll give His life to the younger son. He'll devote Himself to the lost. And that is what you and I are being called to. We're being called to be like the true older son and lay his life down. As you leave today, as we think about this theme devoted to the Father, I hope you'll remember that Jesus wants mercy. He wants forgiveness. He wants us to receive it. He wants to give it. He wants gratitude. He wants us to dispose of and get rid of the entitlement mentality we so often feel. And He wants repentance. He wants people who are humble and willing to repent because He will exalt the humble. I hope today that we'll leave here with a commitment to be devoted to the Father and to be like the true older Son, Jesus. Amen.